Orion's hands moved in practiced precision, though his mind buzzed like the faulty hyperspanner jammed under the medbay console. Jara's leg, a mess of charred tissue and glowing green veins, twitched with every flicker of pain, but she clung to his shirt like a drowning woman. "Don't let go," she whispered, her voice low and tight. He paused, the phrase hanging in the recycled air. For a second, he almost forgot the infection burning under her skin, the plasma sear that had ripped through flesh like tissue paper. A tremor crawled up his spine, something that felt suspiciously like a conscience. He shook it off. No time for that now. "Hey, Doc!" chirped Ducky, the medbay's too chatty assistant bot, its single optic blinking with mock concern. "Are you sure you're using the correct side of the scalpel? I'd hate to see you amputate the wrong leg. Or your own." Orion's lips twitched, but his focus didn't waver. He set the sterilizer to maximum, an old, battered model that rattled like a junk freighter, and pressed it against the wound. The smell of sizzling tissue rose, acrid and sharp. Jara bit her lip so hard it bled a thin line of her strange green blood. "That's gonna leave a mark," he muttered. Jara managed a strained laugh. "You think?" She closed her eyes, but her grip didn't ease. Even through the pain, she refused to let go. He reached for the nanobot injector, a last resort device that had been held together with duct tape and wishful thinking since the last supply run. The needle glowed a sickly blue, buzzing with microscopic life. "This might tickle," he warned, though they both knew it would hurt like a solar flare. "Just—" She clenched his shirt tighter. "Don't let go." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Orion felt something shift in his chest, a soft click like a puzzle piece finally finding its place. He met her eyes, a color somewhere between emerald and stardust, and nodded. "I'm here," he said, steady as the ship's old warp core. "I'm not going anywhere." Ducky beeped, rolling its optic in a theatrical circle. "I'm starting to get jealous. Should I leave you two alone or—" "Ducky," Orion snapped, "run the med scan again, and maybe check the oxygen levels. Last thing we need is you passing out from all the drama." The bot gave a mechanical sigh. Fine, but I'm telling you, this is prime romance material. Could have sold this as a holovid if I had the right lenses." The scanner hummed, displaying Yara's vitals in a mess of squiggles and glyphs. Orion barely glanced at it. Her heartbeat was steady, if a little fast. "You're gonna be okay," he whispered, more to himself than her. Jara's breath hitched, a small sound that carried more weight than a starship's hull. "I trust you," she murmured. Her eyes fluttered and her grip weakened, but she didn't let go completely. "Don't—" The word hung in the air like a star waiting to go supernova. He leaned closer, his hands steady on the injector. "I'm not letting go," he said, voice low but sure. The nanobots hissed, a swarm of tiny lights dancing across her wound. Ducky's voice rose in a dramatic wail. "Injecting unknown alien nanobots into a patient with a highly volatile infection. Sure, no risk at all." "Remind me to write my will, Doc." Orion ignored him. His eyes stayed on Jara, on the strength in her fingers, the trust in her voice. The galaxy might be a cold, indifferent place, but in this moment, in the small space between them, something sparked, a promise maybe, or the beginning of something he didn't dare name. He pressed the injector, and the world around them dissolved into a haze of green light and the steady rhythm of her breathing. Orion's boots clanged against the Artemis deck as he carried Yara through the corridor, her head resting against his shoulder, a smudge of green blood on his uniform like a stubborn stain. The hum of the ship's overworked reactor beat in time with his racing heart. Every step felt like he was treading a wire stretched thin between star systems, and every time Jara shuddered, he cursed under his breath. Behind them, Ducky hovered with its optics swiveling, projecting a holographic map that flickered like a dying star. "Destination, Vesper 9, it chirped in its chipper voice, as if they were headed to a beach resort instead of a smuggler's den, known for its questionable medical practices. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep all appendages inside the ship at all times. Disclaimers apply." Orion snorted, almost grateful for the absurdity. "Ducky, if you had a belt, I'd consider fastening it. Instead, just run a systems check and make sure we don't blow up." Ducky emitted a squeak suspiciously like a sigh. "Ah, the classic don't blow up strategy. I've got that programmed under miracles. Shall I engage optimism mode? Jara stirred, her voice a rasp. Optimism mode? That's a new one. Orion felt a grin tug at the corners of his mouth. Yeah, well, Ducky's been working on stand-up comedy routines to keep us from going insane. Tragic, she muttered, half smiling before wincing again. The ship shuddered under them, a cough of metal and ozone, as though protesting the journey. The Artemis had seen better days, decades ago if he was being generous. Don't worry, Orion said, shifting her weight carefully. Vesper 9's medtech is rumored to be only partially lethal. She gave a soft laugh that ended in a cough. That's, comforting. Ducky interrupted with a suspiciously gleeful tone. Approaching Vesper 9 now. Would you like a fun fact? Vesper 9's atmosphere is 70% sulfurous fog, 10% methane, and 20% unresolved family issues. Orion rolled his eyes. Just get us a landing pad, and maybe find a black market doc who won't charge us both arms and a lung. Request logged, Ducky chirped. Also, I'd suggest wearing a nose plug. The smell's legendary, kind of like burnt socks and existential dread. The ship rattled as the gravity stabilizers fought the moon's uneven pull. Orion braced himself against the bulkhead, the lights above them flickering like cheap bar signage. Jara's eyes fluttered open, and for a second, they were just two travelers on a rough ride through the stars. Hey, she whispered, her fingers twitching. Still not letting go? He squeezed her hand gently. Not a chance, he said. The words felt heavier than they should have, but he meant them. Ducky's voice broke in, too cheerful by half. Docking sequence initiated. Please remain seated or cling to something solid while we attempt not to crash. The Artemis lurched as the docking clamps engaged, sending a metallic groan echoing through the hull. Orion grunted as he shifted Yara's weight, careful not to jostle her wound. Her skin felt clammy under his fingers, the infection's glow pulsing beneath the surface. Vesper 9, huh? She mumbled. Sounds like a party. Yeah, Orion replied. Just remember to RSVP to the Medbay rave. They've got a killer house band, literally. She managed a weak laugh. Don't let them play my song, she whispered. Only if you promise not to request any love ballads, he shot back, and she gave him a tired grin. Ducky beeped dramatically. Docking complete. Emergency medical services, highly illegal and questionably effective. Await you on the surface. Good luck, organics. Orion took a deep breath, staring at the airlock. Beyond that, sulfur fog and desperation waited. But he had a promise to keep and a friend to save. He wouldn't let go. Not now, not ever. The sulfurous fog wrapped around them like a wet blanket, thick enough to hide half a moon's worth of trouble. Orion adjusted his grip on Yara, her breath rattling but steady, her arm looped around his shoulder like a lifeline. Ducky floated at their side, its optic blinking at a frantic rhythm that made Orion suspect it was on the verge of an existential crisis. Welcome to Vesper 9, the bot announced in a tone too perky for the circumstances. Population, criminals, outlaws, and at least one angry ex-boyfriend. Please watch your step and your wallet. Jara gave a weak laugh that turned into a cough. Sounds charming, she managed between breaths. Her skin glowed with that unholy green, making her look like she'd overdosed on reactor coolant. Orion kept his eyes on the ground, where corroded pipes and half-melted metal scraps littered the path like breadcrumbs left by a very confused engineer. Don't worry, he said, as if the words could patch her up better than the ragged bandages. We're looking for a doc named Zeril. Supposedly, he can fix anything, from alien parasites to terminal bad breath. Ducky hovered closer, lowering its voice conspiratorially. Rumor has it he's also good at divorce settlements and identity erasure. One-stop shop for all your post-apocalyptic needs. Orion sighed. Fantastic. Remind me to ask about the extended warranty. A flicker of motion caught his eye. A figure emerging from the mist, all sharp angles and humming circuitry. The man, or at least the machine parts that had once been a man, clicked and whirred as he approached, his limbs a patchwork of cables and steel plates that gave him the grace of a malfunctioning coffee grinder. Orion Vance, the cyborg rasped, voice like metal scraping metal. I heard you might be coming. The syndicates put a price on your head big enough to buy a small moon? I should be impressed. Orion forced a smile. Well, my agent's been busy. He shifted Yara's weight, feeling her tense at the name Syndicate. I'm looking for Zeryl. The cyborg tilted his head, gears creaking. Zeryl's lab's that way. He pointed a finger that sparked ominously. But he's eccentric. Might want to watch your shoes. Thanks, Orion muttered, easing past the metal man. We'll be careful. As they pressed on, Yara mumbled something under her breath, her voice half a laugh, half a groan. Eccentric's better than dead, right? Orion smirked. Depends on the day. He ducked under a sagging pipe that dripped something neon and suspicious. Hang in there, okay? She squeezed his shoulder weakly. Don't let go, she murmured softer than a sigh, but he heard it clear as a transmission. Ducky piped up with all the subtlety of a plasma grenade. He's holding on tighter than an unpaid intern at a corporate apocalypse. Relax, Organic. I'm recording this for future motivational programming. Orion shot the bot a withering glare, but couldn't suppress the grin. Remind me to reprogram your sarcasm filter. Already broken, Ducky quipped. Must have been in the discount bin. They reached a battered metal door with Zeryl's name scrawled in what looked suspiciously like radioactive paint. Orion knocked with his free hand, ignoring the buzzing in his ears and the weight of the galaxy pressing down on him. Doc Zeryl, he called, his voice echoing in the empty corridor. I've got a patient who needs your help. And maybe a miracle. The door hissed open with a squeal that would make a banshee weep. Inside, the lab glowed with the eerie light of alien tech and the soft, rhythmic pulse of machinery that had seen better centuries. Miracles, came a voice from the shadows. They're in short supply these days, but come in and let's see what we can do. Orion felt Yara's grip slacken, but she didn't let go completely. He took a breath that tasted like sulfur and desperation and stepped inside. Zeryl's lab was a symphony of whirring gears, flickering lights, and the faint scent of burnt ozone, like someone had tried to bake a cake in a plasma oven. Orion maneuvered Yara to a padded bench that looked questionably clean, while Ducky flitted around the room, poking its optic into everything like a nosy starling. Welcome to my humble practice, Zeryl croaked, emerging from behind a tangle of cables that looked suspiciously alive. His mechanical limbs clicked in rhythm with his words, a syncopated beat that made Orion's teeth itch. I see you've brought me a challenge. That's my favorite flavor. Orion ignored the creepy-crawly cables, trying to slither under his boots, and focused on the doc's face, or at least the part that still looked human. She's infected with something alien, he said. It's resisting every med patch and standard protocol I've thrown at it. Zeryl's grin was half rust and half metal. Alien infections are like ex-girlfriends. Tenacious, unpredictable, and always showing up at the worst possible moment. He leaned in, eyes glowing like microreactors. Let's take a look. Yara managed a faint smirk. Great. I've always wanted to be compared to an ex-girlfriend. Her voice trembled, but her grip on Orion's sleeve was iron. Hey, he said softly, meeting her gaze. You're not going anywhere. He shifted his stance, trying to look braver than he felt. Ducky piped up from a corner, holding a device that looked suspiciously like a repurposed coffee maker. Orion, did you know Zeryl's certification is from the Intergalactic Institute of Mostly Legal Practices? I'm sure that's reassuring. Zeryl barked a laugh, the sound rattling his chest plates. I prefer the term creative medical solutions. Now hold her steady. This might sting a bit. He lifted a spidery contraption that unfolded like a mechanical flower, each petal bristling with micro lasers and delicate tools. I call her Betsy, he added. She's saved more lives than she's ended. By a slim margin, Orion's gut clenched as the device whirred to life. Comforting, he muttered, planting his feet like a deflector shield. Yara's eyes flickered with pain and something deeper. Trust or defiance, he couldn't tell. Maybe both. Ready? Zeryl asked, his grin a flicker of static. Betsy's hungry. Yara let out a shaky breath. Feed the beast, she whispered, a spark of mischief in her tone even as sweat beaded on her brow. Orion chuckled despite himself. Guess we're all on the menu tonight. He squeezed her hand as the microlasers danced across her wound, their glow reflecting in her eyes like stardust. Ducky chose that moment to emit a shrill beep. Vital signs are holding, though her sarcasm levels are off the charts. Zeryl's hands moved with the precision of a clockmaker, possessed by a caffeine-crazed squirrel. Good. Sarcasm's the best indicator of a fighting spirit. Sparks sizzled as Betsy's lasers traced the infected tissue, weaving a lattice of light that pulsed like a living thing. Jara gasped, her fingers tightening on Orion's sleeve. Don't! Let go! She hissed through gritted teeth, voice raw but unbroken. Orion leaned closer, his voice steady. I'm not. I swear it. He felt the ship's vibrations thrumming in his bones, the galaxy pressing close around them. But in that cramped lab, it felt like they were the only two people in existence. Zeral's laughter crackled like faulty wiring. Hold on tight, lovebirds. Betsy's got one hell of a bite. He adjusted a dial and the glow intensified, a storm of green and blue, dancing like an aurora caught in a bottle. Ducky's voice was a small comfort amid the chaos. Warning, excessive optimism detected. Recommend bracing for the worst, statistically speaking, of course. Orion grinned, even as sweat dripped down his spine. Hey, we've already survived a half-crazed plasma drone, a bounty on my head, and Ducky's jokes. We can handle this. Jara's eyes met his, fierce and bright. Just don't let go, she whispered one last time. He held her gaze, his own grip unyielding. Not a chance. Betsy's last sparks died with a hiss, leaving behind the faint hum of the lab's ancient air scrubbers. Zeral peeled back his visor, his grin wide enough to power a small starship. And that, my dear patients, is how you wrestle a space infection into submission. He flicked a switch on his arm, and a trio of micro-drones zipped off to sterilize the equipment, or maybe fetch a celebratory drink. Orion wasn't sure. Jara's hand slackened in Orion's grip, her breath coming easier now. You didn't let go, she whispered, her smile a fragile curve that felt like a sunrise after a long night. Not even when Betsy tried to eat us both, he shot back, his grin shaky but real. Her skin had lost its eerie glow, replaced by a healthy pink that looked suspiciously human. Zeryl clapped his hands together, the sound like a cymbal crash performed by a drunk robot. Congratulations, you've survived my most cutting-edge medical procedure, and you didn't even ask for a refund. Ducky hovered close, its optic blinking like a disco ball. Vital signs stable, sarcasm levels, heroic, patient cleared for space travel, assuming the next port accepts heavily smuggled passengers. Orion gave the bot a look. And assuming the syndicate doesn't catch us before then. Jara shifted, testing her leg with a cautious grin. Let's just not mention that part. She looked at Orion, eyes bright. You held on. He shrugged, suddenly aware of the new weight on his shoulders. Yeah, well, you made it easy. Even with all the plasma drones, bounty hunters, and exploding nanobots. Zeryl cleared his throat, a sound like a dying airlock. Speaking of bounty hunters, rumor has it the syndicate's got eyes on Vesper 9. I'd suggest leaving before they send a welcome committee. Ducky piped up, voice syrupy sweet. Orion, the Artemis's engines are refueled and, surprise, only partially leaking plasma. She's ready for a fast exit. Orion looked at Jara. You up for another ride? She flexed her leg, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Always. He helped her to her feet, feeling the steady strength in her grip. Then let's get the hell out of here before Zeral decides to test Betsy on my spleen. Zeral waved a metal hand, sparks trailing like confetti. Safe travels, lovebirds. And remember, my warranty expires in 30 galactic cycles, or at the next unexpected explosion, whichever comes first. They made their way through the lab's maze of cables and flickering lights, Ducky trailing behind with an air of forced enthusiasm. Warning, departure imminent, recommending seatbelts, emotional fortitude, and at least one lucky charm. Orion squeezed Yara's hand. Guess we've got all of that covered. She laughed, a sound that felt like home. Except maybe the lucky charm. Ducky beeped twice. Don't worry, I'm an excellent substitute. Statistically speaking. The Artemis's engines rumbled like an old warrior waking up. Orion settled into the pilot's seat, Jara by his side, her eyes scanning the stars beyond the viewport. For a second, the galaxy didn't feel quite so cold. "Where to?" she asked, her tone half challenge, half promise. He grinned, hands steady on the controls. "Anywhere that's not here." The engines roared, the stars stretched, and the Artemis leapt forward, leaving Vesper 9 and its sulphurous fog behind. Orion glanced at Yara, her fingers still tangled with his. He'd held on, and somewhere between plasma drones and half-broken medbots, he'd learned that sometimes holding on meant everything. Ducky's voice cut through the quiet. "Initiating optimism mode. Buckle up, organics, adventure probability. 90%. Orion laughed, the sound carrying them into the stars.